Hello, it's me again. I'm Ray with another podcast episode. Let's get to the weather report first. 16 centigrade, which is 60 Fahrenheit. Oh, by the way, it's 7:30 in the morning. 88% humidity, 1020 millibars. And the flag is, just sort of breezing around the pole in all directions, really. There's a storm coming. I've had several Met Office alerts about a storm. One of them said thunderstorm and lightning. Well, that's odd, isn't it? Thunderstorm and lightning together. I've never heard that. What a daft thing to put. So we have a thunderstorm and lightning coming in later today. Frank, nice to hear from you. When I was talking about anxiety and stress the other day, Frank has come out with quite a good line here. When you've got on top of the ocean, you've got storms and tornadoes and all sorts of dreadful things going on. Beneath the ocean, down deep in the ocean, it's all calm and tranquil. I quite like that, Frank. So don't look at the things around you. Just look deep inside and be calm. I rather like that. Thank you for that, Frank. Lovely to hear from you. Right, let's move on. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I shall begin. Children, then and now. What prompted this particular idea, this topic, was Carolyn. Hello, Carolyn. She says, what did you do as a kid? For example, when you got in from school and weekends? Because my children go straight to their iPads and tablets and phones and devices and lounge about on the sofa. Carolyn goes on to say, don't get me wrong, we do take the kids out at weekends, they go to the woods, they go to the beach, we do all sorts of things, but after school, and if there's nothing happening at a weekend, they'll just lounge about in their rooms or on the sofa, staring at screens. Carolyn was born in the 80s, so she's no idea about the 50s and 60s. The thing is, Carolyn, here's the thing. It was a totally different world back then. And I don't think it's easy for someone of your age, let alone your children, to grasp the idea, the concept of how things were back then. You must see things on the television, various programmes and whatever about the old days, black and white films from the 50s, films from the 60s. You've probably seen all that. But that doesn't really give you an idea of what it was like back then for children. When I got in from school, all day at school, I was thinking of the afternoon and the evening when I'm home, what I was going to do. Now, we all had bicycles back then. Every child had a bike, and I started off, as most kids did, with a tricycle, and then a small two-wheeler bicycle with stabilisers. You remember those? And then they'd be taken off, and I'm kind of wobbling about, but then I could ride a bicycle, and then I remember this, I forget how old I was, it was Christmas time, I must have been about 10, I can't remember. I got a big bicycle, what we called a big bicycle. That was fantastic. Actually, thinking back, no, I must have been about 8 years old, certainly, even younger possibly. I remember that Christmas morning, there's my bicycle. It wasn't new, it was second hand, we didn't have new bikes back then. Although I could ride this smaller two-wheeler thing I'd had that years ago. I was now on the big bike and I fell off, and it was a gravel type road, and my knee, I won't go into that, it's horrible, even thinking about it, it's horrible. It was scraped and graunched and grazed. That was my first experience on a big bike. Getting home after school, one of the things I did was work on my bike, oil the chain, muck about. I don't mean every day, but that was one of the things I did. Adjust the brakes, and then of course the day came when I fitted what we called cow horn handlebars, these big things that were like cow horns, basically. That's why they're called cow horn handlebars. I fitted those, that was fantastic. And then I built a track bike, so that was something else that took up time, getting parts to build a track bike with a fixed wheel. Then we go over the woods, there was a chalk pit, only a small chalk pit, which was fantastic. There are always kids over there on their track bikes, whizzing all around the place, falling off, blood and scrapes and stuff and bruises everywhere. Torn jeans, of course, then you get told off. Those jeans were new, you've only had them a few weeks, now you've torn them. But that was all part of the fun. You've got to rip your jeans. Happy days. Christmas presents, birthday presents. These days, I think kids hope for the latest mobile phone, don't they? Well, I say the latest one, they're over £1,000. Crikey. I've just ordered a new phone, £500. There's nothing flash about it. What is it, a 12 or a 13? I don't know what it is. Some waste of money, because mine's totally packed up now. It doesn't do anything. I hardly ever get phone calls. Yesterday a friend phoned me and I went to answer it and I'm saying hello, hello, hello. And I couldn't answer the phone, so now it doesn't even work as a phone. Everything's mucked up on it. Anyway, £500. Stone the crows. Back in my day, birthday presents, Christmas, we didn't have things like mobile phones. A present worth that amount of money, even back then, I don't know what it would have been the equivalent. Perhaps 50, would it be? 500 now was what, 50 back then? We wouldn't have had that spent on us for a birthday or Christmas. I might have a new part for my bicycle or something. And my bestest ever present was a transistor radio when I was 12. Now that must have cost, I don't know, back then, a few pounds, perhaps a fiver. My father made us a little plot of land each, us 4 kids. At the end of the garden, we had a little plot of land each. And I got into gardening. Well, we all did, I think, to an extent. I was often down there poking around, growing different things and taking cuttings. That was something I got into. Snap something off a plant somewhere. As I'm walking home from school, you see something in someone's garden hanging over the wall. Oh, I'll have a bit of that, snap it off, go home and stick it in the ground and water it. And some of them actually grew. Most didn't. They just died. I had no idea about taking cuttings. I think a lot of activities were outside. Of course, in the winter, we had snow back then. We don't have snow now. We had loads of snow, so snowmen and all this stuff, going down the hill on a toboggan thing, all the winter type activities that children did back then. That was good fun. I don't remember ever being bored. Something else to do in the house, either in the winter or in the summer even, was Meccano. Do you remember the Meccano sets? I had a huge one, which I think was my father's when he was a child. It had an electric motor with it. It was a huge wooden tray full of Meccano, all the various bits, and I would spend hours building, for example, an electric crane. I built a gearbox and a clutch for a car. It actually worked. You could change gear on this little thing I made up. And of course I was learning all the time I was building things. I was learning how to use tools and how things worked. I used to go fishing with a friend of mine. River fishing, coarse fishing, not in the sea. I did try fishing in the sea. I didn't ever catch anything. But I didn't like it. It was too noisy, the waves crashing in. Go down to the end of the pier and fish off the end of the pier. But there were other people fishing there, adults fishing there. And of course, if you got in the way, or if you got your line too near to theirs, they'd moan, oh, kids shouldn't be allowed on the pier. So that was a waste of time. I didn't like the sea anyway. But I did like sitting by the river or a lake. That was really nice, a lake, because there's no noise, there's nothing. Quite nice by a river if it's in the woods, but not out in the open fields. I don't like that. So I'd sit there for hours, very often on my own. Didn't always go with this other chap I knew. I'd sometimes go on my own and just sit there. And sometimes I didn't even put bait on the hook because I didn't really want to catch a fish. I didn't like that, getting the hook out of its mouth. And oh, that was horrible. So I'd just sit there with no bait on the hook, just watching the float bobbing around in the water. Absolutely relaxing in the woods by a lake. Wonderful. It's funny, isn't it? Even back then, at what was I, 12, 13? Even at that age, I used to like being on my own in the woods. Nothing's changed, has it, over all these decades? That's funny. As I said earlier, youngsters of today would find it difficult, if not impossible, to grasp that idea, what we did back then, comparing that to what they do now. A totally different world. In fact, there is no comparison. What is it? They say chalk and cheese. Why is it chalk and cheese? You might as well say water and stone. They're totally different. Why chalk and cheese? That's something else to look up one of these days. Also, we collected things back then. Cigarette cards of footballers and whatever, all sorts of things, trains, all sorts of cigarette cards you could save up. But apart from that, there were other things to collect. Coins, old coins and stamps. I was never into stamps, but I did have quite a nice selection of old coins, and we'd swap them at school. Everyone was looking for a 1933 penny. Apparently it was worth thousands. Rumour had it that there were only something like 6 made. So a 1933 penny was worth thousands of pounds. No one ever found one, of course. I just went online and had a look. A 1933 penny sold for £72,000. 72 grand. Struth. Imagine that. I haven't read about it, but that's interesting. I do remember at school People were always looking through their pennies for a 1933 one. 72,000. That's rather nice, isn't it? I had to go back and have a look. The one that sold for 72,000 was one of only 4 in existence. 4. I thought it was 6. The thing is, what do you do with it? Say you bought it for 72,000. I suppose it's an investment, isn't it? It can only go up in price. But what do you do with it? Keep it somewhere in a bank vault, I suppose. Having said that, it's not millions, is it? You could probably hide it somewhere in your house. Talking of hiding things, I do remember people burying things in the garden in the old days. Money. Stick money in a box, in a plastic bag or whatever they had back then. Do they have plastic bags in the old days? Anyway, some sort of waterproof stuff. Stick it in a box and bury it in the garden. Perhaps under a slab or some stones or wherever. No one's ever going to find it there, are they? I do remember people burying valuables in the garden. I didn't have any valuables to bury. A bit of loose change. People don't have loose change, do they, these days? People used to have change in their pockets. I haven't had loose change in my pockets for, I don't know, 20 years or more? At least 20 years or more. People don't seem to have loose change anymore. Is it just me? Perhaps it's just me. Perhaps I'm strange. No, you're not meant to be saying yes. I don't even have a wallet. In fact, when I went on the Waverley ship, I lied. I do have a wallet. I never use it, but I did take it on the ship with me because I did have some notes. You never know these days. Some places are cash only, some places are card only. So it's rather silly. You have to have a card and cash. It's daft, isn't it? But I don't have loose change at all. In fact, I don't. Yes, Tricia does in her purse, I believe. Do you carry loose change around? There you are, there's something for you to answer. Raise Rants at protonmail.com. The thing is, I remember in the old days with loose change in your pocket, eventually it wears a hole in your pocket, all that weight of the money. Because the old money, the old pennies, half crowns, 2 bob bits, they were heavy. I do miss the pound notes. Do you miss the pound notes? And the 10 shilling notes? Well, I suppose that would be a bit silly these days. It would be a 50 pence note, wouldn't it? But I do miss the pound notes. They were, I don't know, they were part of life back then. Pound notes, greenbacks we call them, greenbacks. I'm hearing more and more these days on the television that children don't know where food comes from. They know nothing about the countryside. Where does bacon come from? The supermarket. Where does milk come from? The supermarket. They've no idea that it comes from cows. Well, bacon doesn't. Milk. A lot of things they've just got no idea about, especially, as I say, the countryside. They don't go to the country. They don't know what's going on there. Farms. They don't know what's going on there. In fact, on the Isle of Wight, there's Tupnell's farm. Look that one up, Tupnell. We always used to take the grandchildren there because it's a working farm, but there's a lot of animals there. They've got goats and pigs and all sorts of things. They've got this huge model cow, and you can milk it yourself. You put the milking machine on it. It's really interesting. It's a great place for kids if ever you're on the island. Go to Tupnell's farm. I remember once when the kids were little, we took them there, and there was this lady saying to a whole bunch of children sitting on the ground, "Now, where does this come from?" And she held up a turquoise-coloured egg. So it was a duck's egg, of course. And our little granddaughter, she said, "A cow." Of course, everyone laughed. And her sister said, "It's not a cow, it's a duck." "A cow? Where does this duck's egg come from? A cow?" Everyone shrieked with laughter. That was fantastic. But they're learning. She didn't know where it came from. She thought it was a cow. Now she knows it comes from a duck. So it's all learning, isn't it? Which I think children, I don't know, they seem to miss out on these days, on that sort of thing anyway. They know how to go into your computer, into your phone. They know how to fix that. They know how to sort your laptop out when you get confused with it all. But they don't know where a duck's egg comes from. When I was at infant school, was it infants or whatever? I was about 5, 6 years old. We had to draw pictures of animals and what each animal was known for. Pigs for pork, bacon, cows for beef and milk, of course, chickens for eggs and chickens. I wonder whether they still do that sort of thing at school now for the smaller ones, the little ones. That's interesting. I must try to find out. Any school... Oh, yeah, we do have a school teacher. Hello, Susan, over there across the channel. How are you? I wonder whether... No, you teach the older children, don't you, I believe? I've just remembered we've got a school teacher in our family, a primary school teacher. I'd forgotten about that. We've got such a huge family. We've got a retired nurse. We have a working nurse. She works in A&E. We have another nurse that is now not nursing. We've got a school teacher. We've got all sorts in our family. We've got a news cameraman. So I should ask the primary school teacher, do you tell them about eggs coming from chickens and beef coming from cows? I should ask him that. Actually, what are we doing? We're going to a wedding. One of the family members, she's getting married. And we're going to a wedding, and I'm going up in the school teacher's car. It's a long story. Trish is going up there in our car. She's going early. I'm going later. Blah, blah, blah. So I'm going up with the school teacher. I will ask him. Also, what's the date today? I've no idea. At the end of this month, we're going to the Isle of Wight for a week. Well, Monday to Friday. I've only just been there on the paddle steamer, and I'm going again. It's a busy old life, isn't it, when you're retired? I've just remembered we have another school teacher, a special needs school teacher. Something else we did then that I'm sure children still do today, we'd go over to the park and play football. Just kick around with the football. I didn't do that so much. I wasn't into football. I don't know why. Some of the children were really into football and some weren't. It wasn't interesting to me. But I'd go over the park and watch them kick the ball around. I'd go and climb a tree or something, or climb onto the roof of the cricket pavilion. As you do, it's something to do, isn't it, while you're mucking around in the park? As far as health and safety is concerned, I don't think, no one I knew had any serious injuries. One friend of mine broke his arm. He fell off my bike. He said, my mum will kill me if she knows I've been on someone else's bike. She's always said, don't do that. And I said, well, you don't tell her, do you? When you get back, you say you fell off your bike. You don't tell her you were on my bike. Oh, yeah. But I don't remember other bad injuries. We'd do all sorts of things, climb on trees, set fire to air raid shelters underground, dreadful things. In fact, I lied. I know one other chap, David. He blew 3 fingers off one hand building a homemade bomb. Was it sugar and weed killer? He was in his dad's shed building this bomb. It's not funny. Well, it was at the time. I suppose it wasn't. In fact, when he came to school, he was laughing. He said, look, I've lost 3 fingers. He was laughing, so we all laughed. And he said the bomb was just about ready and it blew up in his hand. OK, so there was a broken arm, 3 fingers blown off one hand. But that's minor injuries, surely. I don't remember anyone else, though, having serious injuries. Building a bomb, obviously, is a different issue altogether. It's not the best thing to do. Mind you, we used to do things with red matches, the red match heads. You have one big nut, 2 bolts either side with the red match heads in there. Do them up fairly tight without it going off, because if that goes off in your hand, it could really damage you. And then drop it off a bridge onto some concrete, and it would blow the bolts apart. And if you were lucky, one of the bolts just missed your head. I think in the main, health and safety is a good thing, but sometimes it goes a little bit too far, doesn't it? The main thing about childhood back then, I'm not saying this is a difference between then and now, but we were all happy, or as happy as can be, especially if we had a transistor radio for Christmas or birthday, or you had a decent second-hand bike for your birthday. That was always good. And we were happy. We were happy cycling around, building things, going up the tip, up to the rubbish tip, bringing home electric motors and radios, anything of interest that we found on the tip. I found an air compressor once, lugged that home and it worked perfectly. I plugged it in, even a plug on it. It worked perfectly. In the main, we were happy. I think all kids, well, not all, most kids were happy. You hear these days about children being stressed at school with schoolwork. I suppose at our school, in my stream, I was in the C stream, so we were all a bit dopey. We didn't get stressed. We didn't really care about the work. I suppose the brighter kids in perhaps the A stream, the B stream, they were putting more effort into their work. They did their homework properly. So maybe they were stressed with, anxious about their work. But in our stream, we didn't really I mustn't swear, we didn't care at all. As you know, I left school at 14, ripped my liver open, left at 14. And that was a godsend. Having that accident on my bike, rupturing my liver, I left school. Brilliant. I could then get on with life and learn the things I wanted to learn, which was electronics and radio and television repairs, which I'm still doing to this very day, even though it's only a hobby now, it's not my work. Actually, that was one serious injury that I had, rupturing my liver, but that was nothing to do with building bombs or climbing trees or setting fire to air raid shelters. That was simply falling off my bicycle. I wasn't doing anything silly. The gears slipped. I stood up on the right-hand pedal. The gears slipped, so my foot went right the way down. The handlebars came round and whacked me in my stomach. Nothing on the surface, no cuts there, but ruptured my liver. I've mentioned stress, haven't I, many times over the years. In fact, recently I was talking about stress and anxiety, wasn't I? So many people don't realise the damage it does. I'm not saying that if you're at school, you should just say, oh, well, don't care about the work, don't give a beep about the work, and just be happy, go lucky, no stress, no anxiety at all, because that doesn't work for everyone. You know, you've got to try and get on well at school if you can. Just because I didn't, it doesn't mean to say that you have to follow suit. I ended up all right, as it happens. Work-wise, I've had a great time all my life. I haven't earned a fortune, which is something else I'm not bothered about. I don't care about money, long as we've got enough to pay the bills and have our holidays in the Isle of Wight. Ha ha ha. Trisha's dad always said, if I earn a penny more than I need, I'm happy. And when you think about that, it's true. I've never particularly been interested in cars. I liked my old Farina-style MG Magnet in the old days. That was lovely. The walnut dashboard, the leather seats, lovely car. But I'm not bothered about cars, really. I remember friends of mine, they had to have a new car. They saved up. They did their best to buy a brand new car. Of course, the minute you drive it out of the showroom, it's second hand. You know, you've lost a lot of money as soon as you drive out of the showroom. So cars have never bothered me. As long as it's comfortable and reliable, then that's good enough. Thinking about it, I've never been bothered about material things. I like my amateur radio gear. I did spend well over £1,000 on one radio, my main radio. I think it was 1,200. And of course you can spend more. Some of them are £3,000 and more. But this one's good enough. And I've got lots of 1940s transmitters, receivers, all sorts of equipment from the 1940s, which is good. I like restoring that. That doesn't cost much. And we were talking, funnily enough, about furniture the other day. We've only bought one or two items of furniture, brand new. Members of the family will say, anyone want this? We've got a nice old bookcase here. Oh, yeah, we'll have that. Our sofa we bought recently, that was second hand. Just over, what was it, £210 or something? We don't want to spend hundreds or even thousands on a settee, a sofa, a three-piece suite. What a waste of money. I'd rather buy radios with it. But most of our furniture, this table here, do you remember I used to go on about my £3 pine table? This table I'm sitting at here in the high-tech air-conditioned studio, that was from an auction. No one bid on it except me, so I got it for £3. It's a bit tatty, but it works. The big old table, the other side of the room here, with all my amateur radio gear on, that was free. We've got a local free cycle thing. People put stuff on there. If you want this, come and collect it, rather than chuck it away. And we found the table on, or Trish did, found the table on there, and she said, will that do you? And I said, that would be ideal. It's about, what is it? It's about 7 feet by 3 or 4 feet. It's massive, mahoosive, huge legs, and I've got a ton of radio gear on top of it. We did recently buy a new bed. That's different. I don't want a second-hand bed. And we had to buy a new telly and a new washing machine. But that's different. That's not furniture. You know, if we want a coffee table or something for the dining room, then we'll find something second-hand. And, of course, very often second-hand stuff, especially if it's aging, a few decades old, is far better than the new modern stuff. Built properly, lasts forever. Our coffee table, well, it's not a coffee table, it's a wooden chest, a huge wooden chest in the dining room, and it's full of children's toys. When little ones come round, they open this huge wooden chest, pull out all the toys and throw them all over the floor. Great fun. But when the lid's closed, we just use it as a coffee table, and it is so strong, 2 or 3 people can sit on it. If we're running out of space, you can sit on it. You buy some modern rubbish box, if you look at it, it'll fall apart. Fortunately, Trish and I are the same. We're not at all materialistic. What's that old saying? Oh, keep up with the Joneses. You've got to keep up with That means like neighbours, they bought a new three-piece suite. We'll have to buy a new three-piece suite. Got to keep up with the Joneses. Look, they bought a new car. We'll have to buy a new car. I can't be bothered with any of that. There are more important things, I've always thought, more important things than brand new furniture, brand new cars and throwing thousands of pounds all over the place. One important thing, which I'm very pleased about, Trish just called me out into the garden. We've got a kind of wicker hedgehog house, and hedgehogs are meant to go in there, but they don't. The tortoise goes in there, Gary, he likes going in there, and Trish was looking for Gary just now, and she lifted the hedgehog house up, and there's a frog in there. We've got two frogs, definitely, that keep wandering around the garden, hopping around. So he's now made that his home. Make yourself at home. It's funny. And I lifted up the house, and it's sitting there looking up at me. Morning. It's strange. That's what I think is important. Things like that. That's good fun. The most important thing, of course, out of everything is your health. Good to have a few pounds, obviously, to buy what you want. Good to have a nice home and some decent furniture, which we've got, albeit second-hand. And it's nice to be happy, and I think that does bring happiness. Old furniture make you happy. Chuck out all your new stuff. Go and buy some old furniture. That'll make you happy. And don't blame me, though, if you're not happy afterwards. But your health, that's the most important, isn't it? Health. Because without your health, if you're bedridden and you're very ill and it's all horrible and you feel dreadful, then what's the point of even having a three-piece suite, new or second-hand? Which, of course, brings us back nicely to stress and anxiety. That will not make you healthy. So get rid of the stress and anxiety. Now you're thinking, well, it's easier said than done. Yes, you're right, it is. Go for a walk in the woods. Go for a walk down the beach. Sit on the beach, have a look at the ships out there on the horizon, if there are any. There are huge ships that anchor off the Isle of Wight because they're all going into Portsmouth and Southampton docks, in particular Southampton. Massive container ships. They sit out there. There's an anchorage there. And I look at them through binoculars. Yeah, I walk around with binoculars hanging around my neck like a proper nerd. And that's another thing. It doesn't matter what you look like. If you're happy, if your clothes are comfortable, if your shoes are comfortable, that's fine. I wear all sorts of weird clothes. Sometimes people look at me and think, that strange bloke there, look what he's wearing. I don't mean anything outrageous, but I've got an old farmer's hat. I call it my farmer's hat. We go around Amberley and I wear this farmer's hat. Other people have got a proper peaked cap, And there's me in this bedraggled old farmer's hat that I've had for about 20 years or more. And it's got creosote splashes on it where I've creosoted the fence. And it's got oil marks on it where I've been playing with the engine. But who cares? I like that hat. It's my favourite hat and I shall wear it. If anyone doesn't like it, well, don't look at it. Someone said to me when I was a child, don't be one of the sheep. Never be one of the sheep. At the time, I thought, what's he talking about? I was only about 10. Don't be one of the sheep. I realised what he meant when I got to my teens. So that's something else that's always stuck in my mind. Don't be one of the sheep. Just going back to old furniture again. When the grandchildren were young, they'd sit on the sofa and they'd put their feet on it as they do, and they'd jump on it. All right, you meant to say to kids that you don't jump on furniture. But they did. And we'd try to correct them that you shouldn't really jump on the furniture. But it didn't matter if they did. You know what I mean? It was a second-hand sofa. So what? They're kids, they're enjoying themselves. They're children, they were enjoying themselves. I know you should tell them not to jump, which we did. Mustn't jump on people's sofas. But of course they're excited and they race around the room, leap up onto the sofa or the armchairs. There's nothing worse than a show house, a show home. Some of these houses for sale, these new houses, new estates they've built, you can go in and have a look around a show house. And they've got furniture in there and it's all looking posh and nice. I don't like that. We knew a couple many, many years ago. Their house was spotless. You couldn't do anything. You daren't sit down. You didn't like to sit down in case you ruffled the sofa cushions. You daren't put anything down. You sort of daren't move in the house. It wasn't a home. It was a show house. It wasn't a home at all. We've just been given some flowers, which are rather nice. That's reminded me of something. A friend of ours, wherever we went, she would take cuttings. Now, she was in her 70s. She's passed away now, sadly. She would take cuttings of plants. She'd go to a nursery where they sell plants and take cuttings. Rather than buy the plants, take cuttings. And she was successful growing them. And she used to say, well, why buy a plant when you can just take a cutting? No one minds. Well, I think the nursery would mind if they knew. And she went to stately homes with lovely gardens, and she'd walk around taking cuttings of all sorts. She had a big garden, which was just as well the amount of plants she was growing. When I say we've just been given some flowers, Tricia had just been given some flowers. She did something for a friend, and she's got a bunch of flowers, which is rather nice. I almost forgot, I was talking about burying valuables and money in the garden earlier. A friend of mine, we were digging in his garden. We used to build camps, we'd dig big holes and get in them, all that sort of thing. Well, he was digging around in the garden. The idea was to dig a huge trench and put a roof on it to make a camp. He had a big garden, and this was down the end, in a sort of rough area where there's just grass and mud and nothing really. And he started digging where there was a fresh bit of ground that had been dug recently. We didn't take much notice of that. And he found a metal box inside a plastic bag. And we're thinking, this is pirate's treasure, How old were we? 12? So we opened the box and it was full of letters. So we're looking at these letters, still thinking it was something from hundreds of years ago. Well, it wouldn't have been, would it, in a plastic bag? But that's what we thought at the time. And it was letters from a woman to his dad. Would you believe it? We're reading these letters and they're very, quite fruity. Quite whatever. I can't think of the word at the moment without being... Yes, anyway, they were quite fruity, these letters. And his dad was obviously having an affair. And we guessed who this woman was by the name. She lived down the road between his house and where I lived. That's if it was her. It was the same name. And we'd often seen them chatting. So we just sort of put two and two together and came up with that. And he was obviously quite upset. He's reading all these letters from this woman. There were no dates on them, but there were a lot of letters, so this must have been going on for some time. And we'd noticed them chatting for a year, maybe 2 years. Often out in the street, if he went out to his car, she'd go out there and say hello. That's what we thought it was, or just hello and have a chat. But no, there was more to it than that. And he didn't know what to do. I mean, I wasn't going to get involved, obviously. I was just a kid. Well, so was he. But he said, shall I tell my mum? Shall I show her the letters? And I said, well, I don't know. I don't know what you should do. Then he said, perhaps I should tell my dad. Anyway, we were sort of debating this. Well, he was. I was just listening. And his mum came down the garden, and it was lunchtime. She said, would you two like some lunch? What sort of sandwiches do you want? Oh, what have you got there? We're standing there with this box of these letters. She said, oh, what's that? She started reading these letters, and that was it. I went home. She was obviously very distraught. I went home, and shortly after that, they split up. And I did think for some time afterwards, perhaps we shouldn't have dug a hole in the garden. But there again, my friend's dad shouldn't have done that, should he? I remember that earlier when I was telling you about burying things in the garden. It was a few weeks later, or a couple of weeks later, they split up. And there was also trouble with a woman he'd been seeing because she was married. So there was quite a bit of gossip going around the street. I remember all that vividly. And we'd started, no, her dad had started it and this other woman. We once, on the way home from school, a friend of mine and myself, we found a load of black and white photographs just in the gutter. We were cycling along, and they're in the gutter. And I won't tell you what they were. Well, they were bad. And there were photographs of this couple. I'd just say with no clothes on, and we'll leave it at that. And there was an address on the back of one of the photographs. And we thought, should we go round there and put them through the letterbox? But no. In the end, we destroyed them. We burnt them. Because they were pretty, well, I don't know, whatever, you know what I mean. But what we did that evening, we cycled round to this house and we just sort of hung around in the street. There were other kids hanging around. And we saw this woman come out of the house and it was her in the photographs. So that was all quite exciting. Honestly, the things you discover when you're sort of 12 years old. I've done something terrible. It's now Saturday evening and it's quite late. And the podcast should be going on at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I haven't finished it. I've only done half. I forgot all about it. I shall tell you why. My new phone turned up. My iPhone 13 has arrived. And the case for it, the little thing it goes in. And I've been mucking about all day with it. Well, on and off all day. It's all set up and working. But I forgot about the podcast. I absolutely forgot. Stone the crows, what am I like? And something else I spent most of Friday and this morning doing was tidying my room here, my high-tech studio room. I've got in such a mess. restoring this 1940s American military communications receiver. I've now put it back in its case, and I've been tidying up all the tools and everything, sorting out all the wiring, and it was just a mess in there, a total mess. I've been working on it for several weeks. It's not quite finished. It's all working. It's just that one or two things need sorting out, but I'm going to have a break from it because it's getting too much. Also, I've got a transmitter on the way. I know you're not interested in that, but I want to make room on the bench to start working on that. It looks fairly tidy in here, I must say. Not as tidy as it would be if Tricia had worked on clearing up and sorting out everything. But it's good, it all works. I know where everything is. The funny thing is, people look in here and they say, goodness me, how on earth do you find anything? I've got shelves here full of components and bits and pieces. I know where everything is though. Every last nut and bolt, every last valve, tube as you call them in America, every last capacitor and resistor, I know where they all are. Talking of radio stuff, I was listening to something on the radio, in fact, the other day, and they were talking about people don't listen to the radio anymore. They all do online streaming and they don't even watch television. Everything now is online and it's all streaming and whatever they do, YouTube and all this strange stuff that's new to me. Well, not exactly new to me. Now, I've been listening around medium wave. We've got Radio Caroline going. We've got that going on 648 kilohertz medium wave, AM, the AM band. But there are hardly any stations on medium wave now. On long wave, there's only BBC Radio 4. And on medium wave, I think there's Radio Caroline, BBC Radio 5 Live, or whatever they call it. And that's about it. I can just about get Radio Guernsey, Radio Jersey, Radio Wales, but they're all very weak signals. All the radio stations are disappearing from medium wave AM. They're disappearing. At night, when the propagation is good, there's a load of Spanish stations on there. They're all doing football commentary. I don't know how many football matches go on at night or how many radio stations they got in Spain. I suppose it's Portugal as well and Italy. But it's full of commentators shouting in these languages. Next to nothing from the UK at all. It's such a shame. We used to have a load of stations. We used to have BBC Radio Brighton and Capital Gold, Smooth Radio playing oldies. Gold Radio, of course, they were oldies. Radio Capital, was it in London, something like that? They've all gone. Now, of course, back in the old days, as you've heard me say many times, before TV, of course, I remember the days before TV. We got our first telly when I was 5, so I do just about remember not having a telly in the lounge. Whereas now there's TVs all over the place. Well, no, there aren't, are there? There's iPads and phones and stuff all over the place. People still have televisions, but they don't watch ordinary TV. They watch, online stuff, Netflix and Disney and whatever all this other stuff is. So it has changed dramatically. I've seen TV come into our lounge and just about disappear from the lounge. I don't think people sit, well, they do, don't they? They sit in the lounge watching telly, but not TV as we know it. Reminds me of Star Trek. There's life, Jim, but not as we know it. I like the old Star Trek Enterprise. I don't like the new ones. But radio, in the old days, everyone had a radio. In fact, they had several when transistor radios came out. Every kitchen windowsill had a transistor radio. Every dining room had a big old valve radio. Radios everywhere. Then kids, teenagers in their rooms, they had radio to listen to Radio Luxembourg on 208. The pirate ships. There's nothing. Nothing now. Online you can listen to, 50,000 radio stations around the world or something. It seems strange, doesn't it? Over 50,000 radio stations, I read somewhere, are online and you can listen to them. Whereas back in the day, that's all we had. There we are. That's change for you, isn't it? Is that progress? I suppose it is. My new mobile phone, absolute nightmare. I had to log into stuff and I had to refresh stuff and oh dear me. Anyway, it's done now. Bring back the landline phone in the hall, on the phone table with a chair next to it and the telephone directories on a shelf beneath the telephone. Happy days. I'm home alone, by the way. Tricia's gone out with a load of ladies. Someone's 50th. A load of ladies for this 50th birthday party. And I'm picking her up and a couple of her friends. Whenever they phone, it could be 11 o'clock, it could be midnight. I don't know, it could be the early hours of tomorrow morning. So I'm in here in my radio room, and when I finish chatting to you, I shall go and turn my radios on and see if I can chat to someone there, or have a listen round and see see how the football's getting on down in Spain. This episode, as I've said, is about children really then and now, and how the kids of today, when they look back, if I tell them about my childhood, it's just unbelievable to them. They can't believe it. You didn't have a mobile phone. You didn't have a TV with a million channels. and all you had was an old radio to listen to. But talking of mobile phones and what's on the radio now, that just shows how much things have changed over the years. Of course, it's not new to my generation, is it? Our generation. This has been going on generation after generation. No doubt if you go back to someone in 1890, they'd say, oh, we've got these automobile things coming in. I don't like that. They're dangerous. They belch out smoke and they're dangerous and they frighten the horses. That's not going to last. Oh, do you ever watch the Murdoch Mysteries? Murdoch and that lot, Dr. Ogden. It's a Canadian programme, isn't it? Murdoch is quite clever. I don't know whether you've watched it. If you have, you'll know what I mean. It's quite clever because he will say, oh, I don't know about these newfangled things, these telephones that you can take out into the street with no wires, because he invents stuff, doesn't he? And he says things like, well, that'll never catch on. I can guarantee that will never catch on. A telephone out in the street with no wires. And of course, here we are with telephones in the street with no wires. And he mentioned something about automobiles. That won't catch on, frightening the horses. And talking of Star Trek, the communicator, you know, they'd open their communicator and it'd go, deep, 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 beam me up, Scotty, and all that stuff. Well, that communicator back then, that's the mobile phone these days, isn't it? So a lot of things that were fiction back then, these days are fact. We've got a communicator. Actually, that would be a good name for it, wouldn't it? Rather than a mobile phone. I think you call them cell phones in America, don't you? Because you've got cells where, you know, if you walk the streets, you go into a different cell, a different phone mast. And of course, back in the 60s, if someone had said, we will have a communicator like Star Trek, was Star Trek the 60s? I think it was, or into the 70s. And it's video. You can actually see people on this little device. People would have said, oh, don't talk rubbish. How can you have video on a little handheld thing like that? But it just shows, doesn't it, how far we've come. Look at the internet. That's only, well, that's in our lifetime, isn't it? Whoever's listening, it's only in our lifetime. Well, no, apart from the younger listeners. Oh, had another younger listener the other day. 12-year-old Fred. That's not his real name, but I'm going to call him Fred. Hello, Fred, if you're listening. 12 years old, up in Cumbria. How about that? An avid listener. His dad emailed me and said that Fred, as we call him, Fred listens every Sunday and every Wednesday. So that's good. Welcome aboard, Fred. I hope you enjoy it all. Do you remember Star Trek? No, you won't, will you? Oh, of course, they've got Star Trek on now, haven't they? See, that's another thing these days. Whatever programme you want, you can find it. Even though it was, like Columbo. I like watching Columbo, Peter Falk. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But that finished, well, he died, didn't he? Way, way back when. That is one advantage, I suppose, of all this modern technology. Back in the 60s, when I was in the radio and TV workshop, I knew that TV obviously would develop. People talked about flat screen television hanging on the wall one day. And of course, in the workshop, we're saying, well, that's not possible. That can't happen. And it did, of course. But what we didn't see coming was some completely new media, or whatever we want to call it, which is the internet. TV aerials up on your chimney. No one thought the day would come when they disappear. And then no one thought the day would come when the satellite dish on your wall disappears. Well, they're not disappearing, are they, as such? But we've got cable now. In the 60s, there was cable wireless. Was it rediffusion? Certain places in the UK, you would have cable wireless, so a box on the wall with a speaker in it, and you'd have, say, a 6-position switch, which would be BBC Home Service, BBC Light programme, or whatever else. And that was it. And I used to think, well, why do it by cable? We've got transmitters. You don't need cables going from house to house. That's daft. But of course, that did happen, and it's taken over from transmitters. I never thought in a million years we'd end up with cable going to every house, well, almost every house in the land, which would bring you your telephone, your TV pictures, and this internet thing where you can communicate with people all around the world. We didn't ever think of that. We thought that TV and radio would be far better, improvements made, the quality better, more radio stations, more choice, more transmitters everywhere. But of course that didn't happen. We went back to cable. I do remember certain houses in my hometown. I remember seeing the rediffusion cables going from house to house along the gutter by the roof and then across the gap between houses and along the next house. And I used to think, no one's going to do that. You can't have that going to every single house. And there we are. It's done. I suppose back in the old days of the landline telephone, the old Bakelite phone, you got a relation in Australia and you want to phone them and it costs £5 a minute, which was, you could buy a house for that price back then. Well, not quite. People would never have thought that the day would come when you could make a video call from UK or America to Australia and it wouldn't cost you anything. Well, you've got to pay for your phone, haven't you? You've got to pay for the internet, but not £5 a minute or the equivalent of, which would be about £50 a minute now. Don't know what that is in dollars. But people would have said, no, don't be daft. You can't have video. Do you remember Tomorrow's World? That programme here, Tomorrow's World? They tested a video phone on that once. And of course, people were saying, well, that's awful. What if I've just come out of the bathroom and I've got no clothes on and I have to answer the phone? What will I do? I remember older people were saying that. It would be dreadful, people seeing me naked. And of course, that's not the way at all, is it? If you come out of the bathroom with no clothes on. Anyway, it's all good fun, isn't it? Tomorrow's World was funny. I remember once they were saying all garden furniture will be plastic. And I was thinking, plastic? Don't be balmy. You can't have plastic chairs. And they had some plastic chair on there that someone had made. And it looked awful and it was rickety and dreadful. I just thought, well, no, you can't have plastic chairs. We have wooden chairs. And of course, what do people have now in the garden? It's all plastic furniture, isn't it? I don't like it. We don't have plastic furniture. I don't like it. I don't like plastic. But as you've discovered over the years you've been listening to me, I don't like anything. Happy days. Oh, I heard another expression. Have you heard of my giddy aunt? That's a very old expression. It's an explanation of surprise. Oh, my giddy aunt. I did look it up, but I didn't quite understand what they were talking about. It wasn't giddy as in feeling dizzy and falling over. It was giddy as in balmy. Apparently, in the old days, the very old days, if someone was balmy, they were known as giddy. So my giddy aunt, I don't know where that's come from. And I still haven't discovered the other one. I'll go to the foot of our stairs. I don't know what that... Well, I know what it means. Again, that's an expression of surprise, but why? Why go to the foot of your stairs? What is the point? If you know the answer to that or anything else, raise rants at protonmail.com. Be good to hear from you. I haven't added any more photos to the website, but if you want to go and have a look there, raiserants.info. Raiserants, or one word, .info. Do you know, it's dark. It's only, where are we? It's only just gone 8 o'clock. It's dark. Isn't it awful? That's the end of the summer. Yesterday, we had a fantastic day weather-wise, Friday. It was hot. In fact, we both put our shorts on. Trisha and I put our shorts on. Frightened the neighbours. It really was a summer's day, a hot summer, like July, August day. And yet this morning, it was raining, it was chilly, it was awful. And then this afternoon, another hot day again. The sun was blasting. I don't know. It's a funny time of year, this. Autumn, the fall, it's a strange time of year. It's lovely, and I've started picking up leaves. 1 or 2 leaves dropping from the fig tree down the garden, leaves appearing around the place. So I got out my witch's broom, as I call it. It's not quite a witch's broom, but it's a similar thing, good for sweeping the lawn. And as I was saying earlier, a bonfire, that's what we need. It's autumn, it's the fall. Let's sweep up the leaves and have a bonfire. Wonderful. Can't do that. I'm not sure that it's against the law or against bylaws, as they call them, but it's not a sociable thing. It's frowned upon these days. You can't set fire to things in your garden, which would be good fun. What have you got planned for tomorrow, for Sunday, or next week even? Anything planned? Raise rants at protonmail.com. Let me know what you're up to. We've got nothing planned for tomorrow, which is nice. Day off. Unfortunately, the weather forecast for tomorrow is dreadful. rain and winds and floods everywhere, apparently, allegedly. I almost deleted my weather forecast app from my phone because it showed on there full sunshine and it was lashing with rain. I do mean lashing. It was pelting down. And it said on there sunshine. No point in having the thing, is there? No point at all. I nearly swore that again. I must behave. I do behave. I don't swear, do I? I've got to set an example to our younger listeners. Not good to swear. OK, I'm going to leave you here. It's dark. I'm going to make a cup of coffee. I can't have a beer because I've got to go and pick Tricia up later. Could be midnight, could be, I don't know, as I said, early hours of the morning. But a day off tomorrow. My day off will probably be playing radios in here. Look after yourselves, be good, be bad. If you're bad, don't get caught. And I shall see you on Wednesday with the midweek message. I've enjoyed your company immensely. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye-bye for now.